Hello, my name's Tom Palmer and I'm a children's author, and this is the introductory video for some work that I'm doing with the National Literacy Trust around Refugee Week 2022. And this video is just to tell you a bit about what sort of resources that we've created for you and what we'd like you to try and do and how we'd like you to take part, and also to say thank you for engaging with not only this as a literacy project, but more importantly to do with Refugee Week and how we together, by writing and reading, can support refugees. For instance, people who are currently fleeing the war in Ukraine from the Russian invasion, and that's what all this work is about, really. But I suppose before I talk to you and your teachers about what we've got in store for you, what resources you might want to use, I should introduce myself a bit more, because that's what it tells me to do on the list I've written. But we'll come to writing lists later on, because that's a part of what we're going to be talking about. So it's Refugee Week, and I've written quite a few children's books. I've written these, but I've also written quite a few football books, like Football Academy, Foul Play, Roy the Rovers. But a lot of the books now I do are about history. And one thing I've noticed is that frequently my books involve refugees, and I think the reason is, obviously it's a big issue on the news now with Ukraine, and it has been with Syria over the last few years, and it's always an issue. There are always wars, famines and other situations in other countries which cause people to leave their countries and seek refuge in other countries. And it's a really important issue that has gone on for forever, and it's something that's really important now, and something we can do to help with, which is why we're sort of looking into all this work. The books that I've done to do with the refugees, I've found that I've worked out, I've done it in 5 books, and these are there. And I think one of the things for me is that this book is about refugees, specifically about refugees, but most of the others, refugees are part of the story. And I think that's what I've found. Like, I go to so many schools and watch so many different sort of news stories, news things, and I've just discovered that I tend to write about refugees quite a lot because it's such an important issue, but it's not always the main part of the story, but it seems to find its way into a lot of my stories. And I suppose that's because it's important, and it must be important to me, otherwise I wouldn't be writing about it. It's a thing in the world that we have to be aware of, and that's why I want us this week to think about it, read about it and write about it. Anyway, so this is called Gus the Fantastic Football Cat. This features a girl in a school, and it's a story about a cat that can predict football results. But the girl in the story who owns the cat was a refugee from a country called Syria. This is probably my better known history book. This is about a group of children who survived the Holocaust in the Second World War and came to live in this country as refugees 77 years ago. And I've met some of them, and this is their story. So this D-Day Dog, which is another of my books, this is actually about a school trip to Normandy that a school goes on. But one of the children in the class, as in many of the classes I go to in schools around the country, one of the children in the class is a refugee, also in this case from Syria, and her perspective on how the schools study the invasion of one country by another is, or a war within a country, I think was a really important thing to do in the book. And that's why, although it's not directly, it's about the Second World War, and basically it's about a parachuting dog, and there he is, this is Glenn, but it's also about refugees during the Second World War and in the current day. And this is a bit different. This is my book, Pitch Invasion, it's about refugees today, but it's also about when the Romans invaded Britain in the first century. A lot of people, like a lot of sort of Iron Age people, Celtic people escaped to the perimeters of Britain to escape from them, and they were refugees in their own right, fleeing terrible events. And this is sort of a ghost story set in the current day, but also set in in Iron Age / Roman Britain times. And finally, my next book, which is coming out, is called Resist. It's actually about someone called Audrey Hepburn, who was a famous film star, and where she lived during the Second World War, her country was invaded, and refugees actually came to stay with her. And so refugees are constantly in my work, but I'm not here to talk about my work. I'm here to talk about what work we can do together. So this is what we're going to be doing this week. It's going to be broken down into 3 parts. I've written a 5-chapter story called The Girl in the Lewandowsky Top, which you're being encouraged to read. You can either read it or watch me read it. I suspect your teacher's a better reader out loud than I am, but it's your choice. You can watch me read it, or your teacher can read it, or you can read it personally. And it's about a child in a school today who has come from Ukraine. And there's 5 chapters, and in each one you find that you kind of go back into that child's life and experience to find out what she has been through to come to this country as a refugee. And the second part of the whole project is each chapter is inspired by a different something that I've read or watched or seen that is to do with refugees from Ukraine. So one is inspired by a podcast, one by a newspaper article, one by a Good Morning Britain clip, and then there's a couple of others. There's some photographs as well, and I've tried to write the story very much written the story based on what I have learned by listening to refugees, by watching films made by and about refugees, and reading newspaper articles by journalists who've met refugees from Ukraine. And so each chapter is inspired by a different kind of source material, and those source materials are available to you on the Literacy Trust website for Refugee Week. So you'll be able to sort, if you want to, and you don't have to do this obviously because you might not have time, but if you want to, you can read my chapter and then you can see which bits of it, which bits I've drawn from the newspaper or the podcast or the TV show that I've been watching. And it'll show you how I write as a writer, because I can't just make up a story about being a refugee. I've never been a refugee. It's very, very, very hard to imagine what it's like to be a refugee. So that's why I use other sources. And so that's, you've got those sources, you've got the 5 chapters of the story, and you've also got 5 writing challenges. So the 5 writing challenges, there'll be, there's one for each day, and they kind of relate to the chapter you'll have read that day and the source material that I'm talking about. And there'll be writing challenges such as writing to your MP, making a sign to welcome refugees, writing a diary to yourself, creating a fundraising page. And they're all to do with writing for purpose. How we write things down not just for the sake of it, but we can write things down to change the world. If we write a fundraising page, we can raise money to help refugees from Ukraine. If we write to our MP imploring them to give more help to refugees from Ukraine, that might make a difference. Certainly if, let's say, 10,000 children are watching this video and taking part in this project, if you all wrote to your MP, that would have an impact, because that's 10,000 more emails or letters going to MPs. So that's what's on offer. You've got the story each day, like a 10-minute read or a bit shorter. You've got the source material, so the newspaper or the podcast or the photographs that I use to inspire each chapter. And then you've got the writing challenge. And the writing challenge, each writing challenge, as well as a worksheet, has a video where I do my best to explain what it's all about. But I think one of the things that I keep mentioning in these little videos I'm doing is that I'm not terribly articulate when I'm speaking, and I've got some notes here. And that's one of the writing exercises, actually, is writing notes. And I struggle to articulate myself using words through my mouth, but when it comes to writing, I can take time to get what I want to say said clearly. And I like to think some of my books have helped make the world a better place. I really, really hope so, because that's one of the main reasons I do it. I like to think when I write to my MP, I'm trying to make the world a better place. And that's what we're challenging you to do through Refugee Week, is to read, write and think about Refugee Week and what it means through the resources that we've created for you. Thank you for listening, and have a really good week, and all the best from me. Thank you for taking part in the National Literacy Trust Refugee Week 2022 work with me, Tom Palmer. We'd really like to see some of your work, so we're encouraging your teachers to choose 3 pieces of work from any of the challenges that we've done from 3 students, and to send it in to us. And if you do so, one school can win a box of books. That's your incentive. The email address is sport@literacytrust.org.uk. I think if you take images of the pieces of work and then send them to that email address, we will then have a look at them, and some of them will be published on the National Literacy Trust website, and one school will win the box of books. But there are instructions on the website to do with Refugee Week. Thank you very much for taking part in all of this. We really appreciate it. We hope it's been useful for you. Thank you to your teachers as well. Cheers.